You're listening to episode 143 of the Master Your Mind, Business, and Life podcast. I love when I get to talk to a guest for the second time. It's always just so good to relish in the growth of the guest while catching up on their journey and all of the lessons and blessings that they've acquired along the way. This week's guest and I met in Bali about 4 years ago while we were working on the Bali Spirit Festival, and clearly we've stayed close since then. The first time I heard her sing, my entire body got goosebumps. And with the release of her third album, I just knew it was time to bring back singer, songwriter, artist, podcaster, spiritual concierge, and creator of Camp Clarity Transformational Retreats, Norma Jean. I don't think there is a stone unturned within our conversation. We talk about creative burnout and how to rejuvenate yourself after experiencing one, leaning into new projects, imposter syndrome, and of course, the launch of Norma Jean's new album. Before I introduce you to Norma Jean, I want to tell you a few things. First, next week, we're celebrating year 2 of the podcast, and I have a few changes coming, but you may notice one significant change today. I'll go over this a little bit more next week, but ongoing, after you hear my intro music, I won't be greeting you with, "Hey everyone, it's Lauren Smith, welcome back to another episode." Instead, after the intro music, we're jumping right into the conversation. Second, I am now offering podcasting consulting. I've had so many people ask about my process or tips or just how to start their show that I thought this would be a perfect way to blend my 10 years of media marketing knowledge with my podcasting knowledge. More information on this is available on laurensmithbiz.com. And third thing, Norma Jean allowed me to pick a song and share it on this week's episode, so be sure to listen through to the very end of our conversation to see which one I am sharing with you. And speaking of Norma Jean, are you ready to meet this beautiful soul? You know what to do. Tune in, turn it up, let's go.
You're listening to Master Your Mind, Business, and Life. Conversations with everyday world shifters, truth seekers, and rule breakers. Here's your host, Lauren Smith.
Norma Jean, welcome back to the show. I think the first time we spoke on the show, you were on episode 8 or something like that. I know it was in year 1.
Oh my gosh.
Crazy, right?
Say throwback.
I know, this is for sure a throwback. So I encourage anyone who hasn't listened to that episode to go back and give it a listen. But I know since then, both of us have navigated a few different seasons in life since that episode, including the recent launch of your third album, All the Feels, which just from the single you dropped is already giving me all of the feels. But before we dive into that, will you just share a little bit about yourself, or maybe for those who haven't, caught our first conversation or who are newly tuning in?
Yes, absolutely. And I just have to say, we were talking about this before we started recording, but it's been so much fun to watch Mind Biz Life and to watch your journey like blossom. It's been so cool. So I feel, the fact that I was like there at the beginning, and we knew each other before we were podcasters, but like the fact that I was there at the beginning, I'm just like, yes, girl.
Yay.
So exciting. My name's Norma Jean. I make music. I sing and I write songs and I have them in the world, which is wild. And I have a transformational women's retreat called Camp Clarity, where we help women build a spiritual practice and introduce different tools for you to build your own personal practice. I have a podcast called Stay Wild, and I drew inspirational cartoons for a long time, every single day. And I've started doing that a little bit again, but I drew, dedicated every single day. I drew a daily doodle for over 3 years. So I think that about covers it.
Yeah. Well, when we had met in Bali 4 years ago, you were doing these daily doodles and you were posting them on your Instagram feed, and you had done them for a long time. And then I know the last year you took a break from posting them and just posting on your Instagram feed altogether.
Girl, I did not post in my Instagram gallery for over a year.
Oh my, were you just feeling burned out, or what caused you to take a step back?
I was so burnt out. And as a creative person, because creativity is such an elusive thing, right? And everybody's kind of trying to capture it. I've really worked on my creative process, and I've taught workshops, and I've worked with other people in the creative process, and it is cyclical. We often give ourselves all this pressure, and saying this now, I'm just reminded how much I need to hear it. So for anyone out there, it's a journey, lifelong. But every time you create something, there is that postpartum, and every time you rest, you're inspired again to be active. So I think it's for me personally, I didn't write a song for 3 years. All my creative energy was cartoons because it didn't stop. That train was rolling.
Yeah.
And in the midst of that, I launched Stay Wild, my podcast, which I took a break from as well. And I launched a women's retreat business, Camp Clarity, which took a lot of energy and was so beautiful and changes women's lives. So, just that juggle, there was just so much going on. And, when you do multiple things as a creative, there's always one project that's kind of at the helm, at the forefront. And the cartoons, first it was my music. That's really I feel like it's my divine gift, and it's really why I'm here on the planet. And, then from there, the cartoons were born. And then from the cartoons came the podcast. And then from living in Bali for many years, for 6 years full time, the retreats were born. And owning a retreat business is not a creative project, it's a business. And so
for sure,
that took up some energy. And I just, in the process of that, I moved back to the United States. And after living in Asia for almost a decade, for almost an entire decade of living on the other side of the world. And that transition was intense and challenging. And now looking at it, I really am proud of myself, but I did put pressure on myself to be productive. And I think we all do to some extent, but that's what causes burnout. It's important to just, for me, recognize that sometimes you just have to sit on your hands, make some popcorn, watch Netflix, watch more Netflix, take all the BuzzFeed quizzes, and just do nothing in order to let yourself, let the dust settle from a previous project or experience or place even. Yeah.
I remember when you had just come back to the States, I think we just had a quick phone call or something. And I remember even hearing the anxiety in your voice of just going to the grocery store and there being so many options. I just remember having this conversation with you and you're like, it's so overwhelming. To come back into this consumerism lifestyle.
Oh my God. There's 35 kinds of toothpaste at the grocery store, and there's homeless people outside who can't eat.
Right.
So just the black, the dichotomy of, seeing the kind of wealth that exists in the same place and time as the kind of poverty that we have in the US, it's frightening. And it, for a long time, I was just, it shocked me because when you're not used to it, right? I think, in a lot of other countries that are developed, they don't have the same kind of social issues that the United States has. Every country has their own social issues, of course, but it's not the same. And if you're in a country that's underdeveloped, a lot of the time they have familial structures where your family will really support you in a way that we don't quite have in the US in the same way. And so it's interesting. And it was a lot. It was very overwhelming. And I didn't even move to a big city yet at that point. I was in a small town.
Yeah, you were in the middle of nowhere, basically, right?
Yeah, I moved to Oregon, which was lovely. Oregon is a dream. But it was one of those things where it was like, I'm not in the big smoke here. I'm not in the concrete jungle. And yet it felt like a lot, Yeah. So that transition was huge for me.
And then from there you did go to the concrete jungle.
I did. I moved to New York. Oh, It happened. Yeah, so that was really a dream. It's actually, I know how woo-woo your audience gets. So I'm going to tell you guys a woo story
Let's
about
do
how
it.
I'm Mark. Girl. Okay. So I was in Bali last year running a retreat in October, and I got back to Oregon and I was going to move to Memphis and spend some time with my dad. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be here maybe a year or two, and then I'm going to transition to New York, kind of in between Oregon and New York. And as soon as I got back to Oregon, I kept seeing these flocks of geese fly over my head, like, in a V, migrating, beautiful geese. And, in the Pacific Northwest and across the United States, actually, like, there is incredible nature. You just have to, nature exists differently everywhere. And I was so used to Asia and Bali and like geckos and monkeys, for me, I was like, this bird is so big and it's flying. And so some flocks of geese flew over my head. And I thought, oh, wow, that's interesting. And I was in Oregon maybe 3 or 4 days, kind of wrapping things up and packing my car, driving across country to get ready for that. And it happened 2 to 3 times. It was significant enough for me to notice it.
Right.
And then I took maybe about 10 days to drive to Memphis, and I kept seeing these flocks of geese fly over my head. And I just kept saying to the universe, like, I know that I need to go to Memphis and see my dad, but I feel like I need to be in New York. I feel like New York is calling me, and I don't know how that's going to happen. I don't see it, but I feel it, but I don't see it at all. I feel like, yeah, it's down the line, and, I'll save up and then I'll, whatever. But it wasn't in my immediate field, but I felt it so strongly. And I drove across country, stopped in Vegas, stopped in Santa Fe, stopped in Texas, and then got to Memphis. And along the way, in 2 out of those places, geese flew over my head, and I just thought, wow, it's so beautiful. And then as soon as I got to Memphis, 6 hours after I got to Memphis, 6 or 7 hours after I got to Memphis, I was offered the opportunity to move to New York out of nowhere, out of the blue. And then I was like, okay, I'm doing it. All right. Like spirit says, okay. And you like, you go. Okay. Maybe it'll work out. Maybe it won't work out, but you just got to try. And so I did. I moved to New York, and I like to go on long walks. So when I say all these geese flew over my head, it's like because I like to go on, I like to walk for about an hour a day. It clears my head. I move my body. I feel like I get fresh air. For me, that is the best self-care. Just taking a long walk. I can call on my friends in different time zones, and I can listen to podcasts like this one. And so all these geese are flying over my head, and I moved to New York, and I moved in November, and all these geese were flying over my head. And I asked a couple of friends who are shamans, like animal shaman, and I was like, hey, what's the spiritual significance of geese? And a couple of them were like, I don't know, it's kind of unclear. And then a friend of mine said, you got to ask this guy named Danny Paradise. He teaches at Bali Spirit Festival.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I never even took his class. So, I am involved with Bali Spirit Festival. I've performed there several times. I've worked the festival several times. It's such a joyous community event. I really, it's a family, and I'm so grateful to be part of it. So, I got his contact, and I sent him an email, and I'm like, hey, Danny Paradise, I've seen a lot of geese. What's going on here? I heard a story in one of your workshops about geese, and I would like to know the spiritual significance. And so he tells me this beautiful story about how this very famous yogi named Krishnamurti, when he died, a flock of geese flew over his grave, and it's believed by some Native American tribes that birds of prey like hawks and eagles bring messages from spirit down to you. And the belief with geese is that geese bring your prayers up to spirit. So the idea with his specific story was that they flew over Krishnamurti's grave, kind of bringing his spirit up. And for me, the whole time I kept seeing these geese, I just thought, universe, like, I feel like I'm supposed to be in New York. Like, what is going on? And so Danny Paradise tells me this, and how geese bring your prayers up to heaven. and I'm reading through, he's like a super, very scholarly. So I'm getting a lot of like resources, and he's sending screenshots and all this stuff. And then I'm reading, and it says that the Native American tribe that believe this about geese, that hold this belief that geese bring your prayers up to heaven, are the Cree tribe from Long Island. And I moved to Long Island, New York.
Stop.
So I was like, okay, I'm divinely guided by some geese to move to New York. This is my life, everyone. Yeah. So, it was one of those things where you just have to continually trust spirit and do your best and, try and, have the plan, but also be open to the plan happening faster than you planned.
Yeah. And I think that's like such a huge piece too, is like sometimes you just really have to release any of your expectations. And it's like when that intuition is giving you that nudge and you can't make sense of it, it's almost like, okay, I need to lean into it for it to make sense. So
and you feel like you're on a cliff and you're leaning off the cliff.
Yeah.
When you're in the midst of it, you do not feel like you're being hugged by a spirit mama.
Yeah.
No. You feel like you are falling into the void.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's scary. It can be really scary. Just the unknown, right? Like that in itself creates anxiety, especially for I'm like me. I'm a person who likes to have control. I think all of us to a point like to have control, right? And when you feel like you don't have it, it's like, what do I do now? And it's creates that fear and anxiety, and your mind goes in 1,000 different directions, and you're just like, give me one sign. And look at that, the geese.
And it was the geese. And so I moved to New York, and it's amazing. New York is incredible. And literally everything is there. I found Indonesian food. I found an Indonesian community. I found yoga. I found kirtan. I found jazz. I found so many things, and it's really special. But for me, it was one of those things where I realized I just had to get out of my own way. And gosh, do I get in my own way? I mean, we all do, right? Woof.
Yeah.
Girl.
Yeah. Well, and you had even just talked about this on one of your Instagram posts when you were talking about the cycles and the moon and the season and the sun and even careers. They look like a dang mountain ridge with cycles. So let's just talk about these highs and lows, because perception is a tricky beast. So many people will look at you and they'll see your wins. They'll say, oh my gosh, Norma Jean, Cam Clarity.
I have so many shiny wins, but the things you don't see are, the struggles and also the and I want to say you don't see the vulnerability, but I try and show the vulnerability, and I try and show the relatability of just how human we all are. I mean, honestly, in today's culture, right? Even just within jobs, within careers, within art, within social media, within personal brands, within how we present ourselves to the world in so many, like it used to be how you dressed, right? And now it's what your social media says about you. It's what your website says about you. It's how people perceive you. And of course, as human beings, we want to control that, right? As human beings, we want to control how we are perceived. At the same time, it is exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
It's so exhausting. And the pressure, I mean, after drawing an original cartoon every day, I say this like it's an accomplishment for anyone listening, for everyone listening, because I know you have a lot of listeners now. It's so exciting. Please flip through the cartoons. They're not all wins. It wasn't about being funny and smart and having some like viral cartoon every day. It was about showing up for myself and meeting myself in that creative space, and whatever came through, came through. And sometimes you'd post something and you're like, this just feels right today. And then everyone would be like, gosh, I feel the exact same way. And so, it was really, that process was beautiful. And it was also exhausting, right? Like to be the girl who draws the cartoons.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Because that's also then like on the days where you're just like, like I don't have it in me, but I'm going to continue to show up. That's hard. I feel that way with the podcast a lot of times too. I'm just like, I think our conversation is the first conversation I've had in 5 weeks. So I'm really glad that it's you that, I'm kicking it back off with, but I had to give myself that break. I was like, I didn't want to resent the podcast just because I was feeling tired. So I was like, okay, do a couple bulk recordings and then give yourself a break and then put it back in. Yeah.
I mean, by the end of it, I resented my cartoons and I love my cartoons.
Yeah.
And it's not about that. I mean, first of all, I'm so proud of myself that I could show up for myself every day in a creative container to create. That's cool.
Yeah.
And we can talk about creativity and creative conditions and all that stuff another time, or later in that, whenever. But the interaction every day with people on the internet, having to like write a caption and talk about feelings. And after a while, you just don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Every day you want to just take a break. Yeah. And I could have like preloaded and like, had everything scheduled, but that wasn't, the feeling behind the content that I wanted to share.
Right. That wasn't the intention that you had to start with. So
why
autopilot it? Yeah.
Right. And I wanted to tap into the energy of what was going on, but just to be that involved all the time on a social media platform, talking about myself, I'm so tired of that. I don't want to talk about myself. Like, I don't want to talk about how I feel all the time to people and how we can all relate to each other. Sure, there is a time and place for that. But if you don't give yourself space and you don't give yourself a break and you don't honor the cyclical nature of us as human beings, I mean, especially as women, right? Like, traditionally, we have our periods on the new moon. We ovulate on the full moon. Like, our bodies, if you, like, for a lot of people, if you start, bringing a little bit of intention into that, you'll sync up. Like, as women, we are cyclical human beings.
Right.
And so a lot of the time you just, you don't want to do anything for a while. You need to give your brain and your nervous system and your organs and your heart a break to just fill up again, to get that excitement back. And so that's what I did. I mean, in the middle of that, I ran retreats. Jesus.
Right. But, yeah. It's not like you weren't doing anything.
I mean, and then like, but it wasn't so public in such a committed way.
Yes.
Retreats are deep work for a week. And then, Camp Clarity, actually, we do work before and after. And, it's a bit more of a community. But at the same time, it wasn't putting something on a public platform every day. But that being said, now when I look back on my cartoons, I'm really joyful, and they remind me of different times in my life. And I repost them a lot now, and I've started just in the past few months, I started drawing them again, and not in a I'm gonna do one every day, because I used to say the name of the day, like today's day 100, today's day 500, today's day 873. It got to over 1,000. It was wild. So now I'm not labeling them in that way, but they're all still there. And in January, actually, in New York, I started drawing them again, just because I wanted to express some things, and it wasn't forced, and it wasn't scheduled, or it felt really natural. So there are new ones. And now, mixed with my new album content on Instagram and on Facebook and all that. So
I can attest too that your daily doodles were like in the moment. I remember in Bali, we were having we were somewhere. I think it was after the festival, maybe at like the staff like party, or after thing.
That was the staff party.
Yeah, and we were talking, and I just remember like we were having a conversation, and you were like, "Oh my gosh, that's my next doodle." And it was something about like, what's the Wi-Fi password? It's like every person in Bali, like when you go to a restaurant, what's the Wi-Fi password here? So like you had made a doodle about that the next day. And I was like, man, this girl is on it. Like she is on it. So I can attest that they were like very in the moment too. Like you would hear it and be like, yeah, that's it, like that's the next one. So I just always loved and admired that about your workflow. And then of course, with this new album, I mean, just from what I have heard so far, it feels like you have embodied so much self-discovery, and there's a lot of emphasis on purpose and love and gratitude and just overall being in tune. I know as creatives, we typically communicate and share our personal journey. So I'm just really intrigued, when you began working on this album, what was your inspiration or your mindset at the time?
Well, I'm going to be really honest.
All right, do it.
I was available to work in the studio. A friend of mine that I work with, who has a record label called Tropical Folk Records, had some availability, and I thought, great, I want to record some music. And I hadn't written the songs yet. So
Stop. Seriously?
Yeah. So in October of last year, I wrote, I'm trying to count. Hold on. It was, I think I wrote 3 or 4 of the songs. I think 4 of the songs. Maybe one was written, but I completely kind of redid it. And then I wrote 3 of the songs in like a 2-day thing. I had kind of like pieced together, when you have inspiration and you just do a voice memo and you like
Right.
a song comes to you. And so I kind of had pieces, but then I was like, oh wow, no, there's availability. I'm here. I'm doing it. Okay. So I wrote some songs and then I recorded them and they weren't done. And then at the end of March, I wrote 3 songs in a night, literally.
Wow.
And like in the span of like 2 hours underneath the full moon. It was, I think it was that first full moon in April. I'm not looking at a calendar in front of me, but
it was like 444, wasn't it? Like I'm pretty sure that was like the first 444 portal of April.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds right. Or like near it, like around that.
It was in that week, but it was the night of the full moon, and I just wrote 3 songs in like
Wow.
maybe 2 hours. Yeah. And then I thought, okay, I want to kind of complete this and make this an album. And every single song is different, which is very exciting. So the first song I wrote them all. Sorry. Let me just be clear about that. These are songs that I wrote about my feelings. The first song on the album is called Greatness. And it's a very jazzy song. And it's just like a double bass and a very jazzy voice and, like very snappy and rah, rah. And, the lyrics are like, did I miss my chance to be great, or is it every time I wake?
Mm.
Did I miss my chance to be known now that I'm full grown? How does it go after that? Oh, it's like, I think I ask, where do your dreams go when they die?
Wow.
But it's like super jazzy, like I'm past this phase of like, I'm 25 and, I want to make it as a musician, because no one ever really makes it. This is what nobody tells you. No one ever really quote unquote makes it, right? At some point you can become a professional and either have that be your full-time profession or your part-time profession. But, the world is very different from when I was a kid. I'm 33. And, it's not like someone's going to be like, kid, you got it. We're going to sign you to this record label and, you're going to make $1 million. It's the music business is not like that anymore. And record companies absolutely sign people and have huge distribution. But those bands and those artists already have independent followings.
Right.
They've already been doing it for 10 years. Like, Lizzo came up and I was following her when she had like 300,000 Instagram followers, like 3 years ago. And she was like on a festival circuit twerking. Like none of her songs hit the songs that finally, made the top of the Billboard charts. She worked those up and yeah. And so that's the first song. It's really about, you're still alive after you're 25. What does that look like?
Yeah.
You haven't achieved this like bizarre connotation of success that we all kind of believe in a specific way. And then the single, which you have heard, which is called How Does It Feel, which is fun and poppy and
So
folky
love
and
it.
jazzy. And it's my first proper music video with lip syncing and everything, which is really cool.
It
And
looks
it's
so
really
good.
catchy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really catchy. It's really fun. And it's got that breezy kind of pop, joyous. It's got marimba in there. It's just fun. It's great. And then I'm trying to think of the track record. Like, oh, you know what? I have my CDs here. This is so fun. Hold on. I have all the discs. Most people get music online, by the way. So, for those of you who are listening online, it'll be all over the internet. But for anybody who wants a CD, I have them. So yeah, after that is a song called Waiting Room, which is really beautiful. And it's almost like a classic ballad. It's very sweet. Yeah, it feels just really special. And then I've got this song called Thank You, which is all about everybody doing their best right now. And it goes, thank you for doing your best. Thank you for getting enough rest. Thank you for getting those things off your chest. Yeah. And telling me how you feel. Your feelings are valid and real. So that one's really fun.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and I
I
feel
love
like
your voice. I can just listen to it all
thank
day.
you. Thank you. But yeah, that song is that was the first one I wrote in my 3-song, underneath the full moon moment. Sorry, I have a cat here that I'm fostering, and she's decided to be loud and annoying, as
Hey.
cats are. Yeah, so it was really written as just a thank you to everybody because, we're all kind of stuck in the current situation that we're in. And, with the global pandemic, and, it's really important to acknowledge that we're all doing our best. And it's really important to acknowledge our feelings and just to know that they're valid, and I don't think we give ourselves enough. I don't. When I say we, I always mean me. So I don't think I'm giving myself enough of compassion around that, right? Enough of saying, hey, you're doing your best. Thank you for doing your best. Like, and I think as people, we don't say that enough to each other.
Yeah.
So
We're really quick to give it to someone else without saying it to ourselves first. Like,
yeah.
And sometimes we have to turn that back in because self-compassion is just so huge. It's the base of self-care. You can't have self-love without self-compassion. Like they go hand in hand together.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of my journey has been about that relationship with myself. A lot of my songs are like, ooh, a boy likes me. I have feelings,
Yeah.
But actually, like the real juice there is I have feelings, and those feelings are valid, and I love myself. So yeah, this song was really special for me. And there's I went back and forth with the arrangement, but there's actually piano on it, and it's beautiful. And I feel really grateful that it came through. Songwriting for me is something that happens very organically. I don't plan it. Sometimes I'll sit down and I'll try and piece things together, but when that inspiration comes, you just, when lightning strikes, you hold on to that lightning rod,
Right.
And so, for me, I feel really grateful that I can be open in that way. And I feel like everybody has different gifts in the world. Everybody, everybody can sing and dance and write because that's, expression as human beings. But, some people have a little bit more, I guess they're more just attuned to different things. And for me, songwriting and my voice just feels like it's what I'm meant to do. So I feel really grateful about that.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. And then the next song is called River Song. It's a 3-part roots harmony that I wrote about a river in Oregon, which is cool. I went to this very special river that was just incredibly powerful. Like it was amazing. We were in the middle of nowhere, and it was like this river that turns out is like, untouched, and the salmon population is hasn't been messed with in any way. And I sang the song on the album, and it's beautiful, and it's really very sweet and simple. And I made a drum to play on that song that I play on it.
Really?
And I made a drum with a guy in New York named Matt Canal, who is a beautiful person. And he is part of a community led by a Taino elder, which is a spiritual lineage. And he held space and offered a workshop where I made my drum. And it is very special, and it has a lot of intention in it, and a very healing drum, very healing energy, which is really cool. I never made a drum before. I always thought when I eventually played instruments, I'd play piano.
Right.
No, here I am like banging my shaman drum, on this beautiful song.
So dope, though.
Yeah, it's so cool. You never know where you're going to end up. Every once in a while, you just like lift your head up and you look around, you're like, oh, I'm here.
Yeah.
And so I played the drum on the song, and it's really cool. And I'm really excited to share that. It's like I said, every song is different. It goes from jazz to pop to ballad to, back to jazzy pop to this bluegrass, which is, kind of not really bluegrass, but like a roots harmony, beautiful 3-part harmony. And just, this powerful drum. And I picked, the hide, which was ethically sourced. So it's made from an animal that died of natural causes, and it's made from a horse. And so I really, did a lot of research and, did a lot of meditation on what kind of animal, what kind of energy I wanted to bring in to the drum and to the sound of that and the spirit of that and the medicine of that instrument. And so, horses represent freedom and creativity, creative expression, and movement.
How
and
beautiful.
So, that worked out. And then I have a really fun, sweet little poppy song, which is called I Want You. And it's just about loving the entirety of someone and wanting, all of them, including their flaws and their quirks and all of that, it's so sweet. Oh, it's just
I can't wait to hear that
so
one.
cute.
Yeah.
And then the last song is a meditation song. It's a meditation track,
Oh.
which is new for me. I have a really dedicated personal practice, and I sing music that is not spiritual. And I also, in my personal practice, sing mantra. And this song is a little bit of a combination of both. It's called Rest. And, it's a song that I wrote, but it's really all about, my intention is for you to like pop in some headphones, lay flat on the earth, and just let this song kind of wash over you. And it goes like, this is the time to rest. That's part of the lyrics, and it's a beautiful song. So it's 7 songs. It's my new album. It's so exciting.
I can't wait to hear the full thing. And what an eclectic, song genre you have, because you're just giving us a little bit of everything, and I feel like that is so encompassing of you, because you're just a little bit of everything, girl. Yeah.
I hope so. And I feel like it's also an evolution of where my music started. So when I first made music, I had never played a gig. I just started writing songs. And I was teaching English in South Korea in 2012. And I just, like, inspiration struck, and I just started writing all these songs. And I came to Bali on a holiday, and I met some people that were very supportive of my music. And they said, hey, you should come back and you should record some songs. I said, okay, sure. Why not? So I did. And then I ended up making my first album before I ever played a gig. I played a gig to launch the album, kind of a thing. It was so wild. And it was one of those things where, my sound has developed. And this is also, for me, I feel like one of the biggest lessons that I need to consistently remind myself of, and maybe there's some wisdom for anybody else that needs it, is that we don't start out as experts.
Right.
Like, this is my 3rd album I released the first album in 2007. 14. I mean, I released it in 2013. I like, made CDs and all that, but it was before everything was kind of streaming and all of that. So it went on to iTunes in 2014. So what, 6 years ago? Like, my sound is different. I'm different. And the older we get, the older I get, the more I love myself, the more I know myself, the more I learn how to love myself, I guess, and how to really appreciate myself in so many ways.
That's huge in itself, just learning that. And because I feel like, through all these seasons, we are given lessons, we're given trials, we're given so many different blessings as well. And that develops us. So to be able to look back at even the 6-year journey within your music and just see how much you've accomplished and how much you've grown, and then be able to release that through a new creative project. Like, as a creative, I'm just like, yes, but also as a woman looking at you just continuously leaning into your power, it is so inspirational.
Yeah, I've dipped my toes in a tub for long enough, and now I'm getting in the tub.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm finding now, and even just after when you do anything creative, it is medicine in its own way. It has its own medicine. And for me, a lot of the medicine of this album has come out listening to it in post-production and, just absorbing it. And a lot of my power I'm finding is quiet. And it's not in chasing anything. It's really in honoring unconditional appreciation for the people and the things in my life. And anything that I am not in love with, it's okay.
Yeah.
And I'm entering this very new phase of power and appreciation and intimacy that is not seeking, but just very quiet and very expansive within my own being. It's really cool.
Yeah.
And so I feel like this album kind of came just before that and kind of starts to reflect a lot of that energy. Yeah, I mean, I feel like also as women, right, we spend a lot of our lives just trying to learn who we are, because society and, culture and everything else just kind of like piles, expectations and beliefs on us, sure. But even just as people, to get to know ourselves and to learn how to love ourselves and to learn how to love our gifts and to learn how to stand in our own power and be in our own energy. That's a lifelong journey.
Yeah. I don't even remember who said this quote, but it's one of those, the journey inward is like the longest journey. And I'm sure I'm butchering that of some sort, but it is. Yeah. Like, it is the longest journey to just understand yourself. And it's just like, I sometimes feel like once I've like gotten there, it's like something else happens, or there's something else that has been peeled back that I need to dive deeper into, healing or whatever may come up.
No,
it's ongoing. It's an ongoing task. Have you ever like struggled with just that imposter syndrome too, especially when you're starting off with your music, especially, no gigs, going right into an album?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. This is going to sound weird, but I'm just going to, we're in it, girl. Yeah. I know you love my weird.
All day.
I felt like an imposter for some things, for sure. And I think also, especially, in the West, we always have to kind of put up this front of like, we all know what we're doing, right? Nobody knows.
No one knows. I don't know most days.
We do our best. You learn, you grow, you learn a little bit more, but nobody's like, okay, like, on the box of like love, okay, tick that. No, okay, tick that. Nope, nobody knows. So I think for me with my music, I was just so in awe of how I could sing. I didn't sing for like, I sang as a kid, but it wasn't I didn't think I don't want to say I'm talented, but I feel like there is an energy that moves through me when I sing.
Yeah. Oh, you
And so
are
it feels
talented. So I'm just going to go ahead and
okay,
correct that. You
sure.
are talented.
All right,
and
sure.
the energy flows through you. Yeah.
I'll own it. I have a talent that I did not work for.
Yes. Much better put. I like it.
I didn't work for it. And so
it's a gift.
For me, with my singing, it was more about really coming to terms with the weight of that burden, to be, I guess, naturally, not better, but naturally gifted at something that everybody likes to do, or that a lot of people like to do, or that a lot of people appreciate. It feels overwhelming at times. It feels like, well, what are you doing with it? You know, someone offered you $1 million and you're just going to flush it down the toilet. You know, it's
right.
like, what do you mean? Like, you know, so that in that sense, I felt like I was just sitting on so much wasted potential, and that feels heavy. The imposter syndrome came more from having that gift and then not having maybe the background or the education or even just the discipline to develop that into something that is not where I am now. I'm not saying it's better or worse, but like, you know, I don't play an instrument enough to like perform an entire gig with playing, you know, an instrument, accompanying myself. I read music as a child a little bit, but like I can't read music as an adult. I haven't done that in 15 years maybe.
Right.
Things like that. So it's more like, well, somebody gave you this, you know, the universe kind of, you're naturally more inclined to do this thing and you're not working at it. So that felt harder for me.
Right.
I felt like an imposter about other things. So many other things.
Yeah. It's tricky because sometimes like you just feel like you're wearing a mask, and I feel that sometimes even like coming onto the podcast, you know, like where I may be reserved on something, or I feel like, oh, maybe I should already know more about this before I talk to the guests. And I'm like, no, wait, I'm learning too. You know, so it's always just like this battle, but I think go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say it's the idea that we all have to be experts all the time.
Yeah. It comes right back to
when
that.
you're an expert, you can't learn because you're already supposed to know everything.
I think that was a perception of mine too. Like I remember being a kid and I was like, oh man, when you turn 21,
girl, 21 is adult.
Right. I know. I was like, I remember like watching like things like Charmed or like things like that, and just like thinking in my mind, like these are like early 20-year-olds. And I'm like, man, they have no life. Like this is living. And then, and then like you get like to be 21, you're like, wait.
Yeah. Wait, this is not what I signed up for.
Yeah.
I want a refund.
Yes. Can we redo this? Like, this isn't right. Yep. This was not the life I envisioned. And then for me, I know like a big shift for me happened around my Saturn return. I wasn't, you know, very conscious of it then, but I was like, okay, I just start to allow myself more grace and release the expectations on myself. And that was just huge. So if there's someone listening today who just isn't feeling enough, whether that's worthy enough, loved enough, good enough, skinny enough, fit enough, whatever it may be, what would you tell them to help them lean more into their power?
Girl, you're asking me. I'm going to cry. Okay. I have a couple of things to say about that. The first is, I was really hard on myself for a long time. And I thought one day, you know, I think maybe I read something or someone said something to me. I can't even remember what it was exactly, but it was like, you know, that maybe being critical of yourself isn't working. What would happen if you replace that with compassion? Like every time you think a negative thought about yourself or your ability or your performance or your looks or your worth in any way, what would it look like if you just loved that part of yourself unconditionally? What how would you feel, and what would you feel is possible instead of what's impossible or limited? What would feel more possible? You know, for me, I realized that I don't do well with criticism. I do well with praise. I don't do well with pressure. Sometimes I do. We're all procrastinators in our own way. But I like to feel good. And it doesn't feel good to not be nice to yourself. And it doesn't feel good to believe things about yourself that aren't true or aren't changeable, right? Like, we all have parts of ourselves that feel more textured, I guess is the way to phrase that. You know, we can all have moments where we're a bit salty, but you know, for me, when I have those moments now, when I realize that, I don't like go down on, like, I don't like berate myself. I feel like I stop and I say, that doesn't feel healthy. That doesn't feel kind. How can I how can I be kind to myself in this moment? And it's really hard to do that. It is incredibly hard to do that, right? So that's number one. First of all, give yourself a break. Like, give yourself permission. Shit. I don't know if I can say shit on this podcast.
Heck
but
yeah,
shit.
you can say shit.
Like, Lauren and I give you permission,
Yeah.
right? Like you are enough, and do whatever you need to do to know that you are enough, right? Cut out the friends or the behaviors or the habits or the foods or whatever it is that makes you feel like you are not enough, right? Like, that judgment, there's no place for that.
Yeah.
And then also, like, it's a journey. Like, all I can say about that is that the nicer you are to yourself, the easier it is to be nice to yourself. The more you take care of yourself, the easier it is to take care of yourself. The more you love yourself, the easier it is to love yourself. You know, you build momentum with these things, and it's a practice. It's not like you arrive one day and you're like, I'm here and I love myself and I'm fabulous.
Yeah.
Everyone loves me too. That doesn't happen, right? It's a constant, you know. Sometimes, like, I don't know if I love Brene Brown. Brene Brown is like my jam.
Yes.
And she often talks about shame spirals, right? And I think when we talk about shame spirals and how, you know, we can just get stuck into this, like, I'm jerking my neck as I kind of describe this with a hand motion, but we kind of get jerked into these like whirlpools of shame, and you can't quite swim out of them sometimes. But I think the more we practice, the easier it gets.
Yeah. It's like practicing.
You know,
building that muscle up. It's
Yeah.
like building a muscle, you know, it's just like repetition.
Yes, building that muscle up, and then also, building the muscle up. And then I think I was going to say something, but it fell out of my brain just now. But I think with building that muscle up, it's also about being prepared, right? If you know that sometimes you don't love yourself, when you do love yourself, remind yourself, right? Write yourself a letter that you can read when you don't feel like you love yourself, right? Make a list of people you can call. Have journal prompts. I mean, I love your new cards, girl. I'm here for it.
Oh,
You know,
thank you.
But like, have tools.
Yeah.
You know, build that muscle up with resources, with tools, with practices that are nourishing for you, right? Sometimes it's a nap. Sometimes it's Netflix. Sometimes it's a cheeseburger. Sometimes it's journaling and meditating, right? Sometimes it's like yoga. There's no judgment. Whatever it is for you, it's fabulous.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I would say. And then also, on like kind of related, I had the pleasure to meet someone recently that works with the Emoto Peace Project, which, if you're familiar or not, it's where they look at they put different messages and they say different things to water, and then they see how the water crystals form when they become ice. And if you say things to water like you're ugly or I hate you, the water crystals grow like pretty misaligned and kind of like jabby at each other. I don't know how else to like.
Right.
My brain's not. Yeah. And then when you say to water, I love you, right? The ice crystals form in these beautiful geometric patterns. And we're made of water.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
We're made of water. That's us. You know? So I feel like that really resonates. And so, you know, like you can please like find that research. It's very cool. Just do a quick Google. But for me, I, you know, that seeing that kind of like seeing the scientific experiments, it's like, oh, right. Okay. Okay. You know, like maybe it's not going to do me any good. And you know, sometimes that's just a pattern or that's where we are or whatever. But at the same time, we're made of water. Yeah.
That's so interesting too. Just, I've really tried as a parent to be mindful to go ahead and plant that seed of positive self-talk into my kids. I wish I would have done it a little bit sooner with my oldest, but you know, I wasn't as mindful as a mom at 21. With my second, I was way more, you know, I was on a whole different like playing field by that point. So I definitely started a lot earlier with her. I mean, even at the age of 2, we were doing affirmations. And I just remember like getting to this point in the car where I was taking her, she only went to like daycare 2 days a week at that time. But, you know, just on Tuesdays and Thursdays, being in the car and just saying like, I am playful, I am friendly, and just building herself up before we went into this place where there's lots of energies, lots of little kids. Sometimes, you know, kids are learning. They're not always, someone takes your toy, it feels like the end of the world in that area. And I just remember getting to this point where Callie was like, no, mama, I got it. And she started saying it for herself. Like it was no longer repeating after me. It was, she was saying the words of how she felt and building herself up. And just those, like, you notice it and you're like, wow, like the difference and confidence, or even just dropping off at daycare and, you know, being able to tell yourself, I am loved before you leave your mom as a 3-year-old to, you know, a different place. I can only imagine the energetic vibe, right? Like, so when I started just being more mindful of that, you brought up the cards, and it's funny because I actually my daughter Skylar and I are going to work on a project together doing another set of cards, but these times she's going to do the artwork. She's an artist.
I'm putting my order in right now. Everyone listening, I'm first.
Number 1. So I thought like that would just be cool because she is very artistic, and I was like, how can I collaborate with my kids to also help them bring more positivity in the world? Because I'm sure with you, when I create, like it's, first off, it sounds like a little selfish, but I'm doing it for myself, right? Like I pull cards every single day as reminders for myself. And I just wasn't getting something out of some of these decks.
I mean, do you know how many decks I have? How many decks do you have?
Oh, girl? I'm not even counting right now.
Right. Countless.
Right. And I was like, something is missing. So it started off for me. And then I noticed that like my friends would be like, all right, pull a card for me. And I would grab my deck first. And I was like, okay, there's something here. So sometimes it's just filling that own void within your own creative space. And then you're like, whoa, more people, I'm here to share this too.
Yeah.
But it's crazy how much just those positive affirmations really change your inner world a lot. And just me even practicing gratitude. I mean, now I think a negative thought, I remember like in the hurricane last year specifically, I was like anxiety central, like, oh my gosh, we're gonna, you know, I mean, not at one point, I literally thought like we're going to die because it was a Cat 5 projected to hit our town directly. And I was like, oh my gosh, thinking all these like, you know, insane thoughts. And then in the midst of the hurricane, it of course like turns a little, and then it slams the Bahamas, poor people there. And then I just was like, oh my God, there's poor people. And I felt like so empathetic. And then I had to like ground myself back into gratitude and be like, I am so blessed. My family is okay. And it's just, I am so grateful that we have a home.
Yeah.
I am so grateful that we have electricity and we have food. And then like just
Yeah.
being able to bounce back in that, I could not do that 10 years ago. I don't even know if I was doing that 5 years ago so mindfully. But I've noticed that energetic change throughout my body, throughout my energy of just how I carry myself, because you speak nicer to yourself. You practice that muscle of just giving yourself more grace and being able to flow through life. It's powerful. And when you don't have it, you don't realize that what you're missing almost. Like, something's missing.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And
it's like the depth of
quiet.
it.
It's
Yes.
a quiet truth.
So
That's
true.
that for me, that's because I sing and I perform my music. I like loud, shiny things.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a quiet.
I like attention, but that's not what it is. It's that quiet, very, coming from your core, coming from in your belly, that knowing. And that kind of the opposite of butterflies, that just ease within yourself. For me, that's been huge. And I also think what you said just now about creating the cards for yourself, absolutely. And this is what I have struggled with in the past. I don't think I struggle with it anymore, but creating can feel very selfish. Like making art or having a project can feel like you are doing something that's just for you in a way that detracts, right? It's like, well, I made this, so is it okay?
Right.
I made this, like, who else would want it? At the same time, I have this theory about art and things that we create and this is also the thing that we do not give enough credit to. When you create anything, the word create, right? Like music, a project, your cards, anything you're writing, anything, you're painting, any visual, right? You're bringing something into the world that did not exist until you brought it.
Ooh. Yeah.
Like that's what you're doing. Give yourself credit. Like it's huge. And it took me years to understand this. You're literally like bringing something into the world that may outlive you, number one.
Yeah.
Number two, it didn't exist on our plane of consciousness. It didn't physically exist. It didn't exist in our ears and our eye. Like you brought something into the world. That's here now because you did that. And it's just, when I think of it in that context, it blows my mind.
Right.
And then the other thing is, sometimes the things that we create are not for us.
So true.
And we won't ever know who they're for. That's the really, years ago, a friend of mine was teaching at this big yoga festival in Mysore, India. And I went there to support her and go to this yoga festival because I'd never been to India before. It was my first time in India. I love India. And we were all sitting there at lunch. I was, with all the teachers, as my friend was a teacher, and we're at this festival. And this guy says, "Oh yeah, does Norma Jean sing?" And my friend said, "Oh yeah, she's she makes music. She's a really good singer, and she she writes these songs." And he said, "Oh my God, did you write this song called Talk to You?" And I said, "What?" And he had heard one of my songs. He heard my music, and he didn't know who I was. I burst out into tears. This was many years ago. It was the first time that it happened to me.
I just got goosebumps.
I literally was like, what? Like, there's a part of me that that I created that has nothing to do with me anymore. It's part of your reality. Right. Wow. I felt so powerful for being myself. And it was so validating in that way. I just thought, wow. And I realized in that moment, because I've also written songs and recorded things. and like had them on a phone and the phone got lost or wet or stolen or whatever. And I've lost art. And that is also incredibly painful.
Yes.
And I've kind of formed this theory that sometimes the art and the things that we create are just for us in that moment, and they don't get to exist outside of that time and space. Number one, a lot of live music is like that, right?
Yeah.
And then there's another kind of art where it's like for us and people we know and people to appreciate that directly know us and see it as a reflection of us, or even peripherally.
Right.
And then there is art and the people that we create that art for that we may never even know about.
Yeah.
We may never meet them. We may never hear their story.
Or know their names.
Or no, oh God, no.
Yeah.
We don't know their name.
We
don't
know
where they live.
nothing.
We don't know when they live. We don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't know. And yet, that human expression and that experience that we have brought into the world resonates with them in a way that is meaningful and important. Like that.
Yeah. That's like, it is so powerful to even think of it that way. Like, you've given me goosebumps like numerous times, because I'm not sure I've thought of the depth of that to that extent.
It took me a while.
Yeah. Now I'm like, oh man, you're gonna have my mind turning after this call. I'm gonna have to journal it out.
And I believe that this is why it's so hard to create, because it's so vulnerable and it's so personal. And on some level, I think subconsciously we know this is happening, but to step into that power, that's huge and scary and weird. It's weird.
Yeah. When Felicia Bender, she's a numerologist, came on the show, I had followed Felicia for years, and so when I got on, I was so giddy, and I was just like, oh my God, I'm a fangirl. And it took her back. She was just like, what? Thank you. And then she had told me later, like, she just hadn't seen herself in that light, like, to have a fangirl, I'm like, oh my gosh, I nerd out on your stuff all the time. But she didn't know, right? She didn't know me at the time. She's like, I was just a podcaster who approached her to be on numerology. And then to find out, like, I'm like, no, girl, I have been following you. I like read your numerology reports like religiously. And it was just to know that in her, that she was so unconscious of it, and just been like, wow, like, it gives you this depth and this layer of just appreciation for yourself and what you birth out into the world.
Yeah. And it's also, one of those things where you can't create for that. It's like a weird, I keep saying weird, but it's a byproduct. And you have to understand that may happen. And it is also why you should honor your art and why you should honor your calling and your purpose. But it can't be a driving force. Because that's where like ego and fame and celebrity and all that weird, wonky, energetically skewed. That's where things become energetically skewed. But in general, it is incredible to have that experience. And I also, for anyone who has not had that experience, that does not mean that it isn't already happening, right? It doesn't have to do with you. It has to do with the person who you created the art for.
Yeah.
It's not about you at all.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh my goodness. You've just like given me so much to even think on today. I can't even imagine what our audience is feeling right now. They're probably like, whoa.
Whoa, guys.
Whoa. Wasn't expecting this when I hit play.
Oh man.
Well, what can we say? We give them more than they bargained for. But I do know one thing, and I know that you show up authentically with a lot of vulnerability in so many different ways. You own your truth and you harness your inner power. And I know that in itself is so respectable. I respect the hell out of you, but I know that our audience themselves are probably like, all right, I need more Norma Jean in my life, especially after hearing that amazing voice give us a glimpse of her album. Where can I go to purchase it? So lay it all out for them.
Okay. Oh, girl. So for my music, It launches July 31st. I believe this episode will be
shortly after it. I think it's like
shortly after. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's going to be live. It's live, everyone. We're talking to you from the future. So yeah, July 31st. It's available everywhere. Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, all the online streaming platforms. The album is called All the Feels. So if you look up Norma Jean, All the Feels, it'll pop up. If you want to directly buy the album or directly support, please go to my website, which is Norma Jean Music, NormaJeanMusic.com. So normajeanmusic.com is where you can order like the CD I had made, and you can directly buy the album, and a larger percentage goes to production, that kind of thing. But it'll be everywhere. The music video is currently live for How Does It Feel?
So good.
So exciting! My first lip syncing. I'm like I want to say like lip smacking good, but it's lip syncing good. It's like so crazy. And you're trying to like pretend to sing your own song. That's a weird experience.
I'm sure.
It's wild. So yeah, that's on my Instagram and my Facebook, and YouTube, which is all great. And my Instagram is at Norma Jean Loves Doodles, because I drew all those doodles. So that's Norma Jean Loves Doodles. And then, my Facebook for the music is Norma Jean Bali. And Camp Clarity. The retreat is joincampclarity.com. And I think that's it for now.
That covers it. Until next project, when you have one more site. That's like me. You have like all these websites. I'm like, I don't even know. Google.
I know, I have so many. It's like and then it's like you try to link them all. It's the thing. But anyways,
I'll put them all in the episode notes. Yes, I'll put them all.
Oh, great, good. See, you just got to click through, folks.
Yep.
I'm so excited to share my music with you. I feel like it is such a blessing, and I'm so grateful.
You are just a beautiful soul. I'm so thankful that you joined me today, and I cannot wait to share a new song from your album. So with that being said, let's go.
All the big ones anyway. All the losers that I dated every time I've strayed from my purpose, from my joy. Chasing money, chasing boys. Call you every time I destroy. I never knew how to play chords. How does it feel to sit on the sidelines of my life? How does it feel to watch the movie and every time never see your name in the credits, never kiss the girl at the end, never be the last call of the day, always just as friends. Watching all of my stories, never in my DMs. Maybe your chapter is history. You're always leaving me on red, but I want purpose. I need joy, sometimes money and a boy, but no longer getting the noise. No matter how you try and avoid. How does it feel to sit on the sidelines of my life? How does it feel to watch the movie and every time never see your name in the credits, never kiss the girl at the end, never be the last call of the day, always just as friends. Sidelines of my life. How does it feel to watch the movie and every time never see your name in the credits, never kiss a girl at at the end. Never be the last call of the day. Always just as friends. Now we're writing our story, waking up tangled in bed. When you were finally ready, nothing more had to be said. I got purpose, found my joy. We got Monday, you're my boy. We don't have to chase that call, and you always want to join. How does it feel to get off the sidelines and live your life? How does it feel to watch the movie and every time see your name up there in the credits? Always kiss a girl at the end. How does it feel? Last call of the day. We were destined to be more than friends. How does it feel? How does it feel?
Woo! I mean, seriously, how amazing is Norma Jean? What you just heard was off of Norma Jean's new album, All of the Feels, and the song is How Does It Feel? This is the single off the album, but I was really torn on showcasing this one and the River song because I love that one. But How Does It Feel is just so upbeat, and I felt like it goes with the vibe of the show. Plus, I felt like this one might resonate with you because it resonates with me. So go listen to the album and follow Norma Jean on Spotify, stream the album on Apple Music, or you can head over to mindbizlife.com. And on this week's episode notes, you'll find direct links to all of Norma Jean's websites, social channels, and even the album itself. Be sure to let me know which song on the album is your favorite. I'm everywhere on social media at mindbizlife. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever it is that you tune in and turn it up. I'm back on Friday for a new episode of Fuel Your Life Friday, but until then, remember, every level of life is an opportunity to grow. Be well, my friend.